Hello, little Vickies. Welcome back to my channel. Tonight, I'll be sharing some allegedly true stories from Reddit. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and turn the notification bell on so you can be notified every time a new video uploads. If you have a story of your own you'd like to share and possibly have read on the channel, send it to veronica45stories@gmail.com. Link is also in the description. Now it's time to relax and get on with the stories. I took a deep breath to stop the slight shaking in my hand, whispering my affirmation on the exhale. I'm ready for this. I'm ready. Before sliding the blue-lined notebook paper out from its envelope, it was finally time to read my dad's suicide note. It took me almost 2 years to get to this point of acceptance and readiness. 2 years ago, I was known as a bright, energetic girl who was ready to take on the world. Having just finished high school as the class valedictorian, I was following in my father's footsteps and received a full-ride scholarship to his alma mater, where I would also compete nationally on the women's track team. All of this was possible thanks to the support of my favorite person in the world, my dad. Growing up, as far back as I can possibly remember, it was just me and my dad. He had told me that my mother had given in to her drug addictions and walked out when I was still an infant. He always told me I looked just like her, which I can verify by the pictures he showed me. That being said, he was never able to find her. Nobody knows if she's even alive. My dad didn't hesitate to be the perfect dad, regardless of losing my mother. You and I, we're a team, he always told me. Together there's nothing we can't handle. And that was true. Every day he'd take me to school and head straight to work, just to come home and shuttle me to all of my extracurriculars and still make time to help me do my homework and studying. Okay, so sometimes he forced me to do my homework, but it always got done before bed. Dad was genuinely my best friend. Our bond was something most other girls just couldn't understand, as they constantly fought and argued with their fathers. Not me, though. We were a team. There was nothing we couldn't handle. It is until there was no we anymore. That weekend, we spent all Saturday moving my things into my new college dorm. I remember that day like it was yesterday. We talked and laughed all day as we unpacked and set up furniture together. We could only avoid the inevitable for so long, though, as night fell and Dad still had a 3-hour drive home. Finally, we both broke into tears as we said our goodbyes. Remember, we're a team, he told me, choking back his tears. Together, there's nothing we can't handle, I finished for him. And with that, he climbed into his pickup truck and drove off. I cried myself to sleep, thinking about how I had never gone more than a day without seeing my dad, and now I was supposed to live on my own. I woke up early the next day, still wearing my jeans from moving day, realizing that I hadn't stayed up to get the text from my dad ensuring he made it home safely. I picked up my phone to check for his text, but naturally the battery was dead. I connected the charger and got the coffee pot started while I waited for my phone to charge. By the time I got back to my bedroom, the phone had enough juice to turn on. I put in my passcode and went straight to the messaging app, but there was no message from Dad. I immediately had a bad feeling about that. It seemed so unlike him to not send the message when he got home. My mind started jumping to all of the what-ifs. What if he had been in an accident? What if he was in the hospital, or worse? I called, hoping he would pick up the phone and calm my anxiety, but the call went straight to his cheery but sarcastic voicemail he hadn't changed in years. "This is Darren. Sorry I missed your call. Leave me a message and I'll probably call you back, but no guarantees." "Hey, Dad, this is Erin. Sorry I fell asleep. Just wanted to know you got home okay. Call me. Love you." I'm sure he just fell asleep and hasn't got up yet, I told myself out loud. I continued to try and reassure myself that nothing was wrong, but it didn't help. I just couldn't squash the feeling that something was wrong. An hour passed, then 2, then 3. I must have called at least a dozen times, but every call had the same result, straight to voicemail. By the time it was noon, I knew something had to be wrong, very wrong. If my dad slept until 7:30 a.m., that was sleeping in for him, even on a Sunday. I did the next thing I could think of and called my Uncle Dan, who lives only 25 minutes away. "Hey, Uncle Dan, sorry to bother you, but have you heard from my dad? He never called to say he was home last night, and, well, he hasn't answered his phone." "Oh, I'm sure he's fine. He's probably just sleeping in. He's an empty nester now, or maybe he's just working on that old Camaro. Maybe he'll finally get it running," Dan said with a chuckle. "Look," I said while pacing my room, somewhat annoyed by his lack of concern, "can you please just do me a favor and go check on him?" "I'd love to, but I'm at the lake right now, having myself a nice quiet fishing trip. But tell you what, if you haven't heard from him by later this afternoon, I'll stop by on my way home and smack him for you." "All right, thanks, Dan," I said before hanging up, not even trying to hide my disappointment. I couldn't understand how Dan could just blow off the fact that Dad hasn't called me. I knew my dad better than anybody, and this wasn't normal. I called the highway patrol next and asked them if there had been any accidents involving a 2006 Chevy Silverado. Thankfully, there had been none. After that, I called the local police for my dad's city, asking them to file a missing persons report or to do a wellness check. They blew me off the same way Uncle Dan did, telling me that he's an adult and has no obligation to check in with his teenage daughter, and recommended that I wait a couple of days. By 2 p.m., still, with no phone call and nobody that would take me seriously, I grabbed the keys to my dainty maroon sedan and started driving. I drove fast. I couldn't help it, but I made it home in just 2.5 hours, cutting 30 minutes off the usual 3-hour drive. I felt my heart speed up and hit a little harder as I pulled into my neighborhood, anxious to get some answers. As the garage door opened, I could see the Chevy Silverado in the garage next to the rusty old Camaro with parts and tools scattered about. Feeling a little relieved, I took a deep breath in and let my chest push the air back out. "Dad," I called as I walked through the door. His keys, wallet, and cell phone all lay in place in the old beat-up brown shelf next to the door. "Dad, are you home?" There was still no answer as I peeked out into the backyard. It seemed as though the home I'd known my whole life had never been so quiet. It was usually filled with the sounds of conversations, laughter, music, or the sound of sports playing in the living room. Tonight, however, the silence of the house was so muted that each stair creak sounded like the house was moaning in pain as if it was being forced to tell a dark secret. "Dad?" I called out, a little softer this time, scared to disturb the leering silence. I gave his bedroom door a soft knock, then twisted the doorknob and pushed lightly, encouraging it to slowly open with a drawn-out, squealing creak. That's where I found him. The first thing I noticed was the blood. The headboard of his bed had a deep red, almost black in the middle, splatter of blood. It looked as if someone had filled a large water balloon with blood and launched it at the headboard. The splatters of blood projected upwards from the headboard, leaving long streaks of blood up the wall and even onto the ceiling. Laying on the bed was my father, thankfully slumped in a way that I could not see his head and face. Next to him, I could see the deep brown wood stock of his 12-gauge shotgun. This is an image I can't get out of my mind. The harder I try to not think about it, the more I think about it. It haunts me every day and every night. I frequently have nightmares where I watch a dark figure place a shotgun to my dad's head and pull the trigger, sending blood and brain matter flying throughout the room. I always try to stop it from happening, but I'm unable to move. That evening, I experienced what shock truly is. It's as if the part of my mind that controls how rational people should act simply broke. I know I called 911. I know I told them someone was dead, but I barely remember anything else from the ensuing events until the funeral, and the time the detective told me that my father's death had been ruled a suicide. Detective Tilly was her name. I always kept her card in my nightstand. She handed me a Ziploc bag. Inside was an off-white envelope that was once sealed but had been carefully opened. On the outside, written in black ink, my name was written. "It's addressed to you," Detective Tilley said. "We had to process it for evidence, but the case is closed and this belongs to you." The next thing she handed me was her card with a soft touch on my shoulder and a promise that I could call any time, under any circumstance. Over the following 18 months, my life can only be described as an absolute mess. I was hospitalized twice, not for physical injuries, but psychiatric ones. I would simply forget to eat and ended up severely underweight. Another time, I was apparently found by police walking down the highway at night, barefoot, wearing only shorts and a t-shirt. I don't remember that, but needless to say, I did not end up following through with college. When I wasn't an inpatient, I stayed with my Uncle Dan and Aunt Molly, who kindly took me in and handled basically all of the affairs. Over the past 6 months, thanks to the help of my Uncle Dan, Aunt Molly, my psychiatrist, and my therapist, I've made progress enough to finally start feeling like a normal person again. I'd been weaned to low dosages of the pills that help me sleep, and my therapist and I had decided that I was finally in a place where I could and should read the suicide letter addressed to me. Aaron, I want you to know that I'm sorry and that none of this is your fault. Ever since your mother's death, the only thing that brought me happiness was being your dad. Now that you are off on your own, I don't feel as if I have any reason to live. I love you, Dad. I paused, staring at the words, letting them sink in. My fist slammed on the desk before I even realized I was angry, knocking my pen holder over. I grabbed the pen holder and threw it across the room. I heard it crack on the wall, followed by pens and pencils landing in every which direction. "What the fuck?" I said out loud, as my sight blurred slightly from the accumulated tears. This letter was supposed to provide me with closure, not more questions. What did he mean by my mother's death? My father had always told me that she left, and he didn't know what happened to her after that. And why is it that he couldn't continue to be my dad after I left college? I took a deep breath in through my nose and pushed the air out through my lips. I took a couple more deep breaths until I had composure over myself. I started picking up the pens that I had thrown everywhere. They were all blue-capped ballpoint pens, the only pens I would write with. That habit was one of the many that I picked up from my dad. That's when the oddity of the note struck me, something I hadn't thought of until now. The note was written in black pen. My dad only ever wrote with blue pens, as if he had some sort of paranoia with using any other ink. I rushed back to the note and looked at it more intently. The black ink on the paper didn't seem right, and not just the color, but the lettering as well. I rushed to the closet and pulled out the old orange shoebox that contained every card my dad had ever left me. On top was the card he had given me along with my graduation gift. On the top front, written in blue ink, was my name. I placed it next to the suicide note, written with black ink. It was different. The handwriting was close, but different. My dad wrote the E in Aaron with a straight line and sharp points in the graduation card, but on the suicide note, the back of the E was curved. There were other small differences as well, such as how the note, the handwriting, was slightly more slanted than on the cards my dad had given me. Over the next few hours, I pulled out every single card and analyzed the handwriting, comparing it with the suicide note. The more I read, the more I became convinced that the suicide letter was written by someone else. But who? Was my dad murdered? I approached Dan as soon as he got home, holding the letter in my hand. "Dan, there's something that I'd like to talk to you about," I said, standing in the doorway of his office with my free hand anxiously pulling at my hair. "What can I do for you, Aaron?" Dan replied with a smile, but still looking down at his computer. "My dad's suicide note. I read it. it says here that my mother died, but my dad said that she left and he never knew what happened to her. I'm just confused." For a moment, just a small moment, a look of surprise came over Dan's face, as if he'd been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Just as quickly as it appeared, the expression left and was replaced with a kind, caring look. "I'm sorry, honey, I don't know much about your mother, only met her a few times myself." He paused for a minute to remove his reading glasses and set them on his desk. "I'm sorry to say this, but I think it's also fair to say that there were a lot of things your dad kept to himself. I wish he'd opened up about his struggles. We all do." "Okay, I'm sorry to bother you," I said, starting to walk away. Hey, don't leave yet. Is there anything else that is bothering you?" "Well, the thing is, I just trailed off and looked down at the ground. I didn't know how to say it, that I thought my dad was murdered. I started doubting myself and was worried that after all the problems I've had, that might sound crazy." "It's okay, Aaron. You can tell me." "I don't think my dad wrote the note. It's not his handwriting. It doesn't match," I spat out. "Aaron," Dan said, sounding clearly disappointed, "I thought we had all this behind us. Did you take your meds today?" "Yes, I took—" "I'll call Dr. Z first thing tomorrow. We don't need you to have another mental break. I'm sure the therapist can get you in for an emergency session as well," he said while scribbling down some notes on his post-it stack. "You know what? You're right. I'm overthinking this all. I'm just going to get some rest." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and hurried into my room, closing and locking the door behind me. Deep breaths, I thought to myself, deep breaths. I took a few moments to compose myself before sitting down on my chair. I unclenched my hand, letting the old post-it note that I had swiped off Dan's desk fall into mine. The note said, "Pick up prescription for Aaron." The E was written with a curved backline. I placed it next to the alleged suicide note. The handwriting from Dan's post-it note was a dead match. Dan wrote this suicide note, not my dad. Hours passed while I sat at my desk, staring at the notes, grasping the new reality of the situation. A dozen thoughts crossed my mind as to what might have happened, what role Dan had played in my father's death. Molly had knocked on my door and tried to coax me out for dinner. I declined, saying that I needed some rest. My therapist called too. Undoubtedly, he had received a call from Dan. I ignored his call, thinking Dan was trying to make me think I'm crazy. "What are you hiding, Dan?" I asked myself. It was 11 p.m., and I was sure Dan and Molly had gone off to bed. I pulled out that old business card that I had kept for the last 2 years. On the top, in blue handwriting, the card read, "Tamitha Tilley, Detective." I pulled out my cell phone and dialed the number, hoping that she would pick up. Listening to the tone, I couldn't help but think about the day 2 years ago, trying to call my dad, not knowing he was already dead, laying on his bed with his brains splattered across the wall. "This is Detective Tilley." The voice startled me. I had been so lost in that horrific memory that I forgot about the present. "Hello? Is anybody there?" Detective Tilley asked from the other end of the line. "Yeah, sorry. My name is Aaron Mills. 2 years ago you worked my dad's case, Darren Mills." "I remember you, yeah," she said in a kind voice with a hint of sadness. "Some cases are hard to forget. How are you?" she asked. "Well, I'm a little freaked out," I said, feeling comforted by the openness of Detective Tilley's warmth. "The thing is," I started to pace the floor, not really sure how to say it. "Go ahead, Aaron. What can I do for you?" Detective Tilley encouraged. "I know it's been 2 years, and I know this probably sounds crazy, but I've just read my father's suicide note, and it's not his handwriting. He didn't write it." There was a pause of silence from the other end of the line. "Are you sure?" Detective Tilley asked. "Yes, I've compared it to my uncle's handwriting, and it looks exactly like his. I know how this sounds, but—" "I believe you," Detective Tilley said before I could finish. "Look, if you're right about this, we need to get ahead of the situation now. Where are you? I can come pick you up. Bring the note and your uncle's writing sample, and we'll look at this together." It felt so good to hear her say that she believed me. It had been so long since somebody truly believed in me instead of treating me like some sort of head case. Okay, I live at XXX, I told her, already grabbing some clothes from my closet with my free hand. But I'll probably have to sneak out. This is my Uncle Dan's house, and when I said something to him about the note, he got really weird. Oh shit, Aaron, you need to get out of there. I'm already on my way. Keep me on the line. Get out of that house, walk down the street, then start talking to me and I'll pick you up. Okay, I'll talk to you in a few, before slipping the phone into my pocket, with Detective Tilly still on the line. I quietly slipped my Vans on and grabbed a backpack with my computer, phone charger, and a set of spare clothes, along with a folder containing the suicide note, writing samples from my dad, and the post-it note from Dan, before quietly opening the door and stepping out. Going somewhere? I jumped a mile at the sound of Dan's voice and almost fell over with my heart punched out of my chest from the inside. Dan, hey, I said, trying to hide the obvious fact that I was caught red-handed by the man that may have murdered my dad. I was just going for a walk. With your backpack? Dan said immediately, taking a step forward. I took a step backward at the same time. Yeah, just in case I get hot and need to take my jacket off. Dan took another step forward, and I took another step backward to keep out of arm's reach. Look, we just want to keep you safe. You've made such progress, and we don't need another regression. Why don't you hand over the note so we can get past this? His suggestion sounded more like a demand, and it occurred to me that he had probably been listening to my conversation with Tilly. He took another step forward, and I took another step backward. No, I said. It's mine, and it belongs to me. You know, you should remember who took you in and put up with all your psychotic breaks before you go making crazy accusations about the people who care for you. His usually cheery voice now sounded dangerous and sharp, and he took another step forward. I realized that I was all but cornered. He stood between me and the door. Give it to me now, he demanded, no longer able to maintain Mr. Nice Guy facade. He lunged at me. I turned to run, but his hand caught my backpack, ripping me backward. I landed hard on the floor, smacking my head on my chair on the way down. Get off me, I shouted, and started kicking my feet at him. He ripped the backpack away, but I held onto it with both hands on the straps. He pulled again, even harder, and the seam on the strap started to rip. I remembered what my dad had taught me: if I were ever going to be attacked by an evil man, to kick him in the groin. I summoned all of my strength and kicked as hard as I possibly could, placing my lower shin right between Dan's legs. He let go of the backpack and fell to his knees while I fell backward toward the window. You stupid bitch, Dan yelled as he started to stand up. I was already pushing the screen out of the window, and just as he rose back to his feet, I jumped out of the window, landing in the bushes 4 feet below. I scrambled to my feet while wiping the blood away from the cut on my forehead, created by my collision with the chair. I heard a thud behind me and turned to see that Dan had already made it through the window. All I could do now was run. I made it about 10 feet away before something hard hit my head. My vision flashed, and the next thing I knew, I was on the ground with Dan standing over me, a large rock in his hand. Drop the rock or I'll shoot. I looked up to see Detective Tilly standing 20 feet away, her pistol drawn and pointed right at Uncle Dan. Look, this is just a big misunderstanding, Dan said desperately while dropping the rock. Put your hands on your head and get on your knees, Tilly demanded as she walked forward, pistol still drawn. Dan dropped to his knees while I began to crawl away. Now lay down on your stomach, Tilly demanded as she carefully navigated behind him. She's having a psychological break. She needs help, Dan pleaded, but Tilly ignored him. Instead, she grabbed his head and slammed it into the ground, face first, and proceeded to put him in handcuffs with multiple other police cars arriving. A lot happened in the next few weeks. I spent a couple of days in the hospital being treated for a serious concussion. Detective Tilly stopped in multiple times to check on me and keep me updated. The following day, she had the case reopened to be investigated as a homicide, with a suicide note being a key piece of evidence. Dan was arrested that night for assault. Detective Tilly had heard the entire thing over the phone and witnessed him hit me in the head with the rock. When questioned about the homicide, however, he refused to talk and lawyered up. Instead, they turned to interrogate Aunt Molly. It took her less than an hour to crack and confess to everything. As it turns out, it wasn't just my mom who was into drugs. They all were. Aunt Molly, Uncle Dad, even my dad. Uncle Dan, even my dad. One night, when I was just an infant, things got out of hand while they were using, and my mother overdosed. They didn't want to go to the police because they would all go to jail, and guardianship of me would have been given to the state. Instead, my dad and Dan disposed of her body and played it off as if she had walked out on us. They all got clean after that, and my dad made it his goal to be the best dad he could be. The night my dad died, my dad admitted to Dan that he couldn't hold on to the secret anymore. Now that I was an adult, he planned to confess to the authorities what happened 18 years ago. That didn't sit well with Dan, so Dan killed him and made it look like a suicide to keep Molly and himself out of prison. It was a lot to grasp, but ultimately I feel much better finally understanding the truth. I've forgiven my dad and can finally move on with my life and continue to college. I know that, even though he's gone, Dad will always be with me. After all, we're a team, and together there's nothing we can't handle. 6 months ago to the day, right here at this bus stop, my boyfriend was stabbed and killed. There are no vehicles here at this time of night, even here in the heart of the city. No people either. The rain is my company, as are the blinking, glowing lights, ever neon, that send out their colors across the road and the glass and the puddles in ethereal washes and waves. I lift my gaze and look across the street. The rain-soaked road shimmers in shades of yellow, teal, and pink, with flashes of green and orange, occasional drifting red or blue. He was mugged, gave up his phone and wallet, then tried to prevent the guy from doing the same to somebody else, some young woman. The details aren't important, really. I've been through them all hundreds and hundreds of times in my head, and each time the outcome is the same. Tristan taking his final breaths, rasping as he collapses to the ground and bleeds out over the concrete. It's going to happen again right now. I check my watch. In 3 more seconds, I'm sat at the bus stop and turn my head to look to the right. Tristan shimmers into view, and my heart pangs dreadfully as it always does. I don't know why I keep doing this to myself. There he is, a watery, shining, and silvery being. Translucent. He can't hear me. He can't see me. It always starts the same. He's listening to music. He looks so peaceful here. I wonder what he might be thinking about. He has a rose in his pocket. He looks down to it and, with his tongue sticking out to one side, cautiously and carefully adjusts it. My pulse races. This is where the atmosphere changes. I watch as he looks up in surprise, as he is engaged by the mugger. I can't see the mugger himself, only Tristan, but the situation is plain on Tristan's face. And besides, I've seen the CCTV. I know how it goes down. He speaks some silent, voiceless words as the rain falls, as he narrows his eyebrows and regards the mugger with caution, with care, with disdain. I watch as he is provoked, as he steps to the side and puts out an arm, as he attempts to defend the young woman he is with. I watch as he holds out his forearms, using them as makeshift shields, as they are slashed by the assailant's knife. I see the fear, the determination in Tristan's ghostly face as he fights, as he struggles to bring down the attacker, as he silently shouts for the woman to get away. A vein bulges in his neck and the knife is forced into his chest. He gasps and goes in for a second time, into his stomach. Third. Then a third. I watch as he staggers and collapses to the road. The rain falls right through him, and he makes no splash as he lands in the shimmering puddle by the curb. He lays there, his ghostly body fading in and out of sight before he falls totally still and the vision is lost. Lost until tomorrow night, when it will be back, when he will be back. Same time, every night, over and over, over and over. I used to think it meant something, that I was being shown a clue, that Tristan was trying to communicate with me from beyond the dead. No one else can see it, of course, just me. I got so angry, so desperate, so hopeful, so bitterly, bitterly hopeful. But night after night, week after week, month after month of trying to save him, to learn the meaning behind the vision, this echo of his death, I just gave up. My soul may as well have left my body. It doesn't mean anything. The echo's purpose here, if any, is to taunt me. Or maybe it's just a glitch in the system. Who knows? Who cares? I don't know why I still torture myself like this. Yes, you do, Imogen. You come here to watch him for that first minute, that brief little window when he's listening to music. A lump rises in my throat, as it tends to do when I dwell on the subject for too long. You come here to see those moments of blissful peace, to wonder what song he might be listening to. As for me, I'm listening to a version of Wicked Games this evening, and I'm imagining that Tristan was listening to it too. It's a good song, sad but peaceful. You should check it out if you don't already know it. Thunder rumbles and rolls softly across the distant sky. I look up, but there is no lightning here, only the steady, breezeless rain and the blinking lights of the city. I see one of the specters above me, hovering there above the road, between the towering buildings and the neon screens and signs. An ad for Coca-Cola rolls across one such screen in shades of faded white and glowing red, and these colors dance across the specter's ghostly, flowing body. The specters used to scare me, too, back at the beginning. Now they don't. They don't do anything. Picture a snake, a king cobra, ideally. You know those snakes? They have the hoods. The specters look kind of like giant cobras, roughly human size and made of smoke and liquid wind, dark and shadowed. I don't know how else to describe them. They are featureless, eyeless, but I get a sense that they're watching me nonetheless. There are 3 of them tonight. Sometimes there's 4, sometimes 2, sometimes 1. They hover in the air, and then, after a while, they just drift away. I never see them arrive as such, but I can expect them to always show up as the play-by-play of my boyfriend's death is performed for me at the bus stop. I look back down to the ripples and reflections on the road and chew the skin around my fingernails, gnawing softly, trying to push away each and every thought that intrudes upon my mind. Impossible, of course, but I try regardless. The specters start to turn. They're going to glide away now and disappear from sight. I note that for the 3rd night in a row, they're taking the same route, drifting past a faintly, almost imperceptibly buzzing billboard and behind a towering skyscraper at the intersection. Curious. Follow, urges a voice in the back of my head. I ignore it. I can't listen. I daren't get my hopes back up. My heart can't take it. I can't bear the thought of hoping for meaning in this senseless hell. Follow. Don't make me, I whisper, a lump rising in my throat. Follow, Imogen. And so I pull down my sleeves and pull up my hood, and with a tremendous exertion of will, I rise. Hope wins again, I guess. I despise it. I hate it, but who even cares? I may as well follow. I have nothing to lose tonight. Let's see where we end up, shall we? So I cross the road. I don't bother checking to look for traffic. There are never any cars at this time anyway. My feet splash through the water, and the colors of the lights are sent out in circular ripples from the steps of my shoes. I lift my gaze and squint through the rain. I catch the shadowy tail of one silent specter as it drifts down a parallel street at the end of the road and against my better judgment I hasten after it, suddenly fearful that I might lose its track. Through the city we go, between the lights and the quiet sentinel lampposts. "Where are you taking me, specters?" I murmur aloud, but they don't answer me. I wouldn't expect them to anyway. I'm gradually led to another road, not dissimilar to the first. A burger joint with faded paintwork, but a flashing orange sign stands directly ahead on the corner. The rail of the overground train winds its way between the buildings to my left. Steam drifts lazily from a vent near my feet. And over to my right. And over to my right is another scene. Another ghostly, shimmering scene playing out right there on the street. My blood runs cold and my adrenaline surges at once. This is new. I've never seen another ghostly scene before. The one featuring my boyfriend's death has always been the only one. I thought it was unique, but that assumption is promptly shattered as the specters drift through the air above. The scene ahead depicts a girl a little younger than myself. She's on her phone on the sidewalk. She keeps looking up to somebody I cannot see, talking words I cannot hear. "What is this?" I ask aloud to no response. The girl turns to face her invisible partner, a silhouette of wispy, silvery light, and I watch in horror as she is struck by something large and fast. It's difficult to say what it is, but my best guess would be a car, careening from the road and across the sidewalk. Her ghostly body is thrown back and hard against a lamppost, and she crumples to the ground, her neck clearly broken. I wipe the water away from my fringe with a trembling hand. "Why are you showing me this?" I ask in a whisper, but the specters do not respond, and when I look up to them, I see that they have gone. The rain falls all around me, and I close my eyes, allowing it to wash over my skin. When I open them, the ghostly girl, too, has vanished. There's nothing else out here for me tonight, and I'm on my feet. I might as well just walk home. My dreams are disturbing and sad. I awake in my apartment the next day to find that the rain continues. It washes down the side of my only window. I lay there for a further 85 minutes before I get up. My sheets reek. I'll clean them tomorrow. I very rarely leave the building whilst it's light these days, but something compels me back out onto the streets today. Perhaps it's the haze, my desire to walk in the rain. Who knows? But out I go. I wearily grab the first coat that I can find in my room, and I head out, walking the streets with my head down, breathing in the cool city air. I don't know where I'm going. I'm just following my feet. I need milk. I guess I'll stop by somewhere and pick some up. I trudge onwards, gnawing at my little fingernails. I don't go to my regular place. I go a little further. I walk a different road, and before long I realize that it's one I recognize. It connects directly to the place the specters brought me last night. I stop and look around, faintly bemused. "What an exciting twist of fate," I utter to myself, deadpan, looking over to the spot where I saw the ghostly playback, over by the burger joint. And I freeze. That's her. She's right there. The girl. Fuck, and she isn't a ghost or a silvery wisp of light. She's a human, alive, flesh and blood. I start to panic. I don't know what to think or how to act. It's definitely her, but in full color this time, standing in the exact same spot, going through the motions. She's on her phone, occasionally glancing up and talking to her friend. Oh my God, the car. I hear it before I see it, careening wheels around a corner, unseen, and I don't fuck around. With a burst of sudden frenzied energy, I leap from my position and race the length of the road towards her. I can hear the car skidding down the road towards us, the engine revving louder and louder. The girl looks up to talk to her friend, completely oblivious of her surroundings, and I barrel right into her, bringing her down to the ground with a grunt of alarm and covering her with my body as the car slams into the curb behind us and flies right overhead, little shards of glass raining down all around. I hear shouts and screams of surprise through the rush of blood in my ears, And after a final screech and a metallic crash, there is suddenly silence. Quiet. It hangs in the air for a moment before I clamber up and away, staring down at the girl on the ground. And she stares back up at me, chest rising and falling, in shock but alive. Others come to our aid at once. Someone calls an ambulance as a crowd gathers. Someone puts their hand on my shoulder, but I shrug them off. I turn and start to stride away, steadily at first, but then faster. I hear a voice that I presume to be the girl's. "Hey," she shouts after me. "Hey, wait!" But I do not. I do not wait. I just run all the way home and slam the door shut behind me, tired and stressed, struggling to mentally process the implications of my interaction. I look down at my hands to see that they are shaking. Breathe, Imogen, breathe. It all happened so fast. Fuck. I yank back my hood and run my hands through my hair. Did I just save her? Did I just save that girl's life? The ghosts. So they can show me things that are yet to happen, and I can change them. I can alter the outcome. And there it is again, that sickly sweet blast of hope. And I don't bother trying to resist this time. Fuck it. It's a delicious, dangerous drug that I inject directly into my veins. Maybe Tristan can still be saved. Maybe I can change what happened. I await the night, my emotions going round and around. But when darkness falls, I head back out through the streets. As the lights glow and hum and the cars dwindle until the roads are empty, I return not to the bus stop, to the site of Tristan's death, but to the street corner by the burger joint, and it is here I find the specters. I look down at my watch. The minutes tick by, and I await the moment that the ghostly girl is due to appear. And of course, she does not. Why should she? I saved her. I prevented it from happening. I stare up at the specters, hovering grimly in the air above, and I throw out my hands. I can save him then? Can I? I've asked you before, and I'll ask you again, I shout. Can Tristan be saved? Please let me save him. The specters are silent in their response, but one by one they begin to drift away down the roads, down a new path between the neon lights, and I set off in quick pursuit, my jaw set. They lead me through street after street, till we come to the wall of a pharmacy. A glowing green cross with a couple of damaged LEDs hums softly overhead, and I see the third ghost. An elderly lady walking along the sidewalk. Nothing seems out of the ordinary here, but I brace for some terrible shock, watching anxiously as she passes me by. The edges of her silvery form dance and drift in the rain, and as she reaches up for the crosswalk button, she suddenly jumps and clutches her chest. She stumbles from the curb to the ground, rasping and wheezing silently before dissolving into a silvery stream. Okay, I said out loud, I get it. You're showing me things yet to happen so I can stop them. I can stop them all, specters, and if I do, you'll bring back my boyfriend, right? You'll allow me to save Tristan too? But the specters don't answer. As with before, they have simply vanished into the rain. I look down to my watch, 2:15 a.m., and I try to remember the timings of the previous events. Tristan's death takes place at the same time every night. The time was the same for the girl, too, but it happened in the day, not the night. So 12 hours, then. I get 12 hours warning. At 2:15 tomorrow in the afternoon, I will return to this spot. And return I do. With newfound purpose, I wait for her here, for the elderly lady in the urban haze of the afternoon. And as sure as the neon glows, there she is, hobbling peacefully down the sidewalk towards me. Excuse me, I say to her before she has a chance to reach for the crosswalk button, and she looks up at me. Would you like some assistance crossing the road? I ask her. Oh, goodness, that would be lovely, she begins, as a car honks its horn on the opposite side of the street, loud and sudden. Her words are caught in her throat, and she clutches her chest at once in surprise, though this time I am here to hold her, to help sit her carefully down on the bench nearby. I am able to tell someone to call for an ambulance, and they do so, and I stay until the paramedics have taken her away. But she was in decent spirits as they loaded her up. She smiled at me. She gave me a wave as the doors were closed. And so, just like that, I save another. This becomes a routine. Every night I head to the previous place. I wait for the arrival of the specters in the rain. I follow them to their next location. From ghostly vision to ghostly vision, and every subsequent day I return to that same spot to prevent the tragedy from ever recurring. It becomes my drive, my purpose. Every night the rain falls, and every gray afternoon I save a life, each one later in the day than the previous. I prevent a cyclist from being struck by a car with a simple wave of my arms. I save the life of some idiot vlogger doing pull-ups off the edge of a balcony by shouting into his face. I spend an entire night talking to a young man on the edge of the bridge, listening to his life and convince him to give tomorrow a try. I never falter. I never screw up. I am always planned and prepared. With a careful word of caution, I prevent a policeman from being shot in the chest. I stop an accident by preventing a drunk driver from returning to his vehicle, and I stop a little girl from running out into the road. As I said earlier, each vision is shown to me a little later in the night. The last one, the one of the girl, I saw at 6:31 a.m., a minute before sunrise, and surely the final vision of these night after nights, the specters never drifting during the day. So when darkness falls, I head not to this spot as I have done before, but to the site of Tristan's death, my go-to. I wait bitterly for the sequence to begin, and yes, there in the neon-washed darkness he shimmers into view. My heart hurts as I watch him listen to music, his final song. I shout up into the air before I even see them, to the specters. I know that they will be there, watching. "Okay," I shout, turning around in a circle in the middle of the road. "I did it. I followed you all the way through the night. How many people have I saved now? 30 or more?" I laugh. It's a mad sound. "That's it, right? That's all. I did it. I did what you wanted. Now help me save Tristan." Silence as they hover in the gloom and the falling rain. I laugh a little louder, screaming now. "Help me save Tristan. Tell me that he can be saved. Let me change this one. Let me change just this one vision, and I'll save 1,000 more, I promise." I begin to sob. "Please, tell me he can be saved. It has to mean something. Something has to change." I drop to my knees in the road with a splash, hands to my face. I can feel the presence of the specters, dark and silent above me. "Why are you putting me through this? Please, just let me go. Let it end, please," I whisper through tears. "Please." "They can't bring me back, Imogen. I'm so sorry." I lift my head, not believing my ears. But there is Tristan, crouched right before me, still that same ghostly projection, still with floating wisps of silver light at his edges, but his mouth moves and I can hear him speak. With a desperate lurch, I reach out for his shoulder, his arm, anything, but my hand goes right through him and my fingers connect with nothing but air. "There is no way back," he says again in a whisper with a slow, sad smile, and I burst into tears. There's so much I want to say, but I just can't get out the words. "We'll be together again one day, Imogen," he says to me, his words soft and low. "But for you, the rain still falls. You must go on." He smiles and he reaches into his pocket. He withdraws the ghostly rose he has there and gently passes it to me and holds it for a moment in my hand, ethereal and beautiful. And when I look up, he has gone. The rose fades a moment later. The specters depart. One by one they drift quietly away, and as the rain falls, I begin the long walk back to my apartment. So it goes. I never saw Tristan again. The sequence of his final moments never played from that night on. No ghostly shows. I went to check the spot a few times, but his death has passed at last, it would seem. The dance is done. The specters are still around, though, when I care to look for them. Sometimes I even follow them just to see where they will lead. Sometimes they take me back to the sites of the people I have saved. Sometimes to nowhere in particular. Sometimes back to my own apartment, and sometimes they lead me out from the city. I walk all night and they lead me far and away, all the way to the coast, and then disappear as the sun rises over the ocean. Tristan always loved the ocean. And sometimes, if I return to that bus stop at just the right time, if I position myself in just the right place in the road, then the ghostly rose returns to my hand, and I hold it gently, just for a minute or two, just as long as I need. So I can't pinpoint the exact year I had this dream, but I think it was around the time I was 17 or 18. Anyways, in my dream, I was older than I was when I had the dream, not sure exactly how old. But I worked at a cafe with 7 other employees. It was 3 men, 4 counting me, and 3 women. We were super close friends, and I'm talking like took turns going to each other's houses for the holidays type stuff. I don't know how to explain how I knew that, but I just felt deep levels of familial love and connection. It ended abruptly, but waking up I felt grief, like I actually lost these people. It kind of messed me up for like 2 days, but I was too embarrassed to explain to anyone why I was upset. I mean, what was I supposed to say? I'm upset I don't get to see my dream friends anymore? That being said, I forgot about this experience until about 4 to 5 years later when a good friend of mine asked me to pick up his shift at a cafe he worked at. I, of course, told him no problem, but I wasn't working that day, and the extra cash was a nice incentive. This is where it gets wild. When I got there, I met the owner, but I didn't recognize him at first until the other workers got there. But seeing them together, the exact number of women, exact number of men, plus, of course, I recognized their faces. I completely froze, and my heart dropped into my stomach. They were no doubt the people from the dream. Memories of that dream instantly flooded back, and I honestly don't know how I carried on throughout the day. I felt like crying and throwing up, but I just kept my mouth shut, not wanting to seem crazy. Since that day, my buddy hasn't needed me to fill in for him, and I never built up the courage to go back, even as a customer. A few years back, when I was 17 years old, I went to a party. Everything was all right until the host started getting really intense and creepy. By that point, it was around 3 a.m. and I was pretty drunk. I decided to call an Uber in order to avoid any advances from the insistent guy. The Uber shows up and I try to sober up when I get in. The driver starts making small talk with me, and in the state I was, I failed to see the red flags. He starts to ask me about the party I was at, and I told him about the creep, and then he told me it was because I was short and cute. He then asked my age, and sensing a weird vibe from him, I told him I was a minor, thinking that would deter any further advances, but it turns out that was a horrible idea. He was driving pretty recklessly on the highway, and I snapped out of my drunken stupor real fast. He then asked me to go get drinks with him that same night and told me he really liked me. I quickly told him I'd get grounded if I stayed out any later and that my mother was awake and waiting for me at home. Keep in mind, I lived in Mexico, and the amount of people, and especially women, that get murdered daily is ridiculously high. When we got to my home, I noticed the doors were locked, and he kept on insisting on us go to get a drink, even though by now it was almost 4 a.m. I tried to act as nice as possible when I told him I couldn't that night. He then asked for my phone number and told me we could go out the next day, so not being the first time that some creep had asked me for my number, I gave him my number but changed the last digit so he couldn't actually contact me. But then he actually dialed the phone as I was getting out of the car. Of course my phone didn't ring, and he started getting agitated and said I gave him the wrong number. I played drunk and stupid and recited my number again, but actually said it correctly in order for him to think he heard the last number wrong. He chuckled and said it was his bad and told me we'd see each other the next day. I made my way into my house and immediately woke my mom up because I was terrified. She managed to calm me down and told me to go to sleep, so I went into my bedroom and started putting my pajamas on when I heard my phone ringing. The Uber driver was trying to video call me, and I lost my shit when I saw that on my screen. I immediately denied the call and then noticed he'd sent me about 15 messages asking what time he could pick me up and why I wasn't replying. Of course, I blocked him right away and thought that would be the end of it. The next day, I got a text from an unknown number and checked the picture and saw it was the driver. He asked me why I'd blocked him and started spamming me. I immediately blocked him. Over the course of the next month, I'd get messages from random phone numbers, and it quickly became obvious that it was the driver. I would always block him, but eventually I reported him on the Uber app and changed my number. Only problem is, he knows where I live. My uncle was a schizophrenic and said he thinks this is how he got his schizophrenia. He said he was walking through Louisiana, he hitchhiked a lot for fun, and decided to stop into a gas station to get a drink because he was thirsty. Before he walked in, a man approached him. The man, as he described him, was very shady. He said it seemed the man had a darkness about him even though it was sunny out. Very tall with bad teeth. He asked my uncle to put his hand out and put a weird-looking coin in it. He said it seemed like a very old coin. The man told him, "As long as you hold on to this coin, good luck will always be yours. But if you lose it or throw it away, terrible things will happen to you and your life will fall apart." My uncle thought it was very weird, but said thank you and went into the gas station and bought a soda and a $1 scratch ticket. He won $250 on the scratch ticket. He was freaked out at this point. He came back outside, and the man that had given him the coin was nowhere to be found. My uncle walked down the road a ways and, always being a religious person, threw the coin into the swamp and kept walking as fast as he could, trying to get a ride home back west to Virginia, because he was so scared in that moment. Again, he was schizophrenic, so it's totally possible this was the beginning of his illness and it was totally real to him. But I've always wondered. Hello again, little Vickies. Thanks for listening. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe with the notification bell on. If you have a story of your own you'd like to share and possibly have read on the channel, send it to me at veronica45stories@gmail.com. Link is also in the description. Until next time, be good.